So, good afternoon and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Tuesday, February 17th, 2026 for the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation. Would the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 19, Resolution appointing Eric Sloan as the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation.
For the record, we are joined by Councilman Charlin and Councilwoman Warwick. Other members may join periodically. As I believe you are aware, prior to your statement or answering questions from members, we have to do an oath. So after, I'll read it, and then you simply say you do, if you do. Do you, Eric Sloan, solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this council shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And do you further affirm that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the Department of Parks and Recreation to which you have been nominated?
I do.
Wonderful. I'll turn it over to you. If you have remarks, you can certainly give remarks. But if you tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself,
I do.
and why you're willing to serve in this capacity.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm truly honored and excited to be nominated by Mayor O'Connor to serve as Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm grateful for the trust placed in me and for the opportunity to speak about the responsibility and reach of this department. Throughout my career in service, I've been fortunate to lead in professional, nonprofit, and volunteer capacities. The combination of those experiences, managing teams and operations professionally, leading community-based nonprofits, and serving directly as a volunteer has prepared me for this moment. I believe I bring a unique blend of transferable skills: strategic leadership, operational discipline, relationship building, and a deep understanding of how programs affect residents on the ground. My experience leading community-based organizations, combined with my background in organizational leadership and development, people management, and program development, has shown me how essential strong partnerships, genuine engagement, and thoughtful planning are to building healthy neighborhoods. Parks and Recreation is central to that mission. This role is deeply personal to me. My wife and I are raising our 4 children here in the city of Pittsburgh. Our family has grown alongside parks, rec centers, and neighborhood spaces. From a volunteer perspective, I began as a volunteer coach and later led a citywide youth sports nonprofit. But my service is extended beyond youth athletics through my work with Bridges FC and as a big brother in the community-based mentorship program through Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've seen how recreational spaces and public programs serve as gatherings points, places where mentorship happens, where families connect, and where community is strengthened. What draws me to this role is not just youth programming, but the full intergenerational impact of this department. Parks and Recreation supports seniors through our Healthy Acting Living Centers and Wellness Program. It strengthens neighborhoods through our rec centers that serve as safe, welcoming hubs. And it promotes food access and local economic vitality through farmers markets and food nutrition programs. And it maintains the public spaces that residents rely on every single day. I see myself as a connector, someone who brings people, organizations, and city departments together around shared goals. I lead with empathy, believing that listening to residents and frontline staff is essential to delivering effective service. And I bring operational accountability, experience managing teams, budgets, and performance systems to ensure strong execution and measurable results. Residents expect reliable programming, equitable investment, and responsive leadership across every neighborhood and for every age group. I believe that the combination of my professional, nonprofit, and volunteer experience has equipped me to meet that responsibility. If confirmed, I'm committed to bringing collaboration, transparency, empathy, and a service-first mindset to Parks and Recreation as we work to deliver safe, vibrant, and equitable spaces for every Pittsburgh resident. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll turn over to members for questions. Maybe we start with Councilman Coghill, work our way down.
Hi. You too.
Thank you for coming out to meet you last week. And I spoke to the pastor, and he said that it was a productive meeting. And you got to see the place, the facility, you got to see the gym. We don't have a recreation center in Beachview, as we discussed. So do you see opportunity there as to like, and I think he didn't tell me on the earlier conversation, but did you get into the nuts and bolts as to what
I did, yeah, and they have a nice space there, and we did talk, and we have supplemented programs previously, but we did talk about potential to partner soon, hopefully for spring programming, and also talked about some potential partners and nonprofit partners that he could reach out to as well. And so that was a really productive conversation, both for us providing support, but also thinking about how we can partner externally as well.
Yeah, he's a really great guy. I'm going to have him apply for maybe the Stop the Violence funding, which I think will help his, not that what you were there for, but you know, he's asset to our community. He works with at-risk kids.
Yep.
He also works with our immigrant population there. We have lots of,
Yes.
you know, Latino specifically, which is really good. You grew up in Mount Lebanon? Yeah, right. Mount Lebanon High School?
Mount Lebanon High School.
Okay, yeah, right. Watch that Tony Griffith working under you. You know this guy, right?
A little bit. He was older than me, but we've reconnected.
Oh, yeah, he was a Mount
after,
Lebanon guy,
after
too.
22
Yeah,
plus
yeah,
years.
yeah.
So
Right.
been in Highland Park now for the past 12 years.
Oh, you're in Highland
so-
Park, are you? Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Highland Park, you're a representative out there, Councilwoman Gross, and I have a site, Brookline Community Center. You know Brookline Community Park down there. Behind the ball fields is this big open 1.3 acre site that we had already have plans for like a farm type of thing for planting. You know, we undertook this during the whole you know, food shortage after the pandemic or during the pandemic. But turns out, you know, people really want this, and it really makes sense. I just want you to come to the site. I'm bringing Yvette there. We're going to schedule something when the weather breaks, and we'll show you. We actually have a plan that we spent good money on and everything else. So just needs buy-in from the administration and you and Yvette and, you know, some others, and you'll see the potential when you get there. So I just want you to come and visit the
would
site
love to
with
come
us,
out.
all right?
Trying to make the
Right,
rounds
right.
as much as possible and as frequent as possible.
And I was just meeting with the mayor, and we talked about Moore Park. We talked about Brookline Community Park. There are some improvements there that we have listed, and we've already kind of taken initiative to work on last year, basically. So nothing major, you know, moving a pickleball court in Moore Park that we have to do by court order, believe it or not, because of the noise.
Yeah,
Ba-ping,
I'm familiar
ba-ping.
with that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you know, little things like that. But we have really great parks, you know, and we have a great, you know, have healthy active living centers, I guess is what the name is. And we don't have rad parks, like, you know, but we have big, beautiful, small parks like Moore Park, Phillips Park, and the Brookline Community Center. You know, some of the best parks in the city of Pittsburgh, I think. We just got a brand new pool up at Moore Park. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I was just
it
there for a meeting last
project
week.
of mine.
So,
Yeah, right. Second biggest pool in the city. It's really great pool. So really, you know, look forward to following through on those types of improvements. But
we're in full,
I really just popped in here to say hi and thank you for meeting with Pastor Wade, and I look forward to working with you.
Yeah.
And Mr. President, I think you're going to make a good judge, man, swearing everybody in. You're getting pretty good at that. I heard you out there. Do you solemnly swear? What's he going to lie? What are you going to lie about? Park? So we did that. You know, one of the council members enacted that last couple years.
One of them.
So he has to play judge now too. So with that, I'll cede back to you, Mr. President. I'm going to jump out. I just wanted to say hello and shake your hand. Give me your sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Charlin.
He's the one that needs to be under oath. We need to put him under oath.
I think your car's already running. With that, thank you so much for being here and your willingness to serve. So I'm looking through your resume here, which is it's got to be a CV. This is far too long for a resume here. But one of the things I noticed is that you played college soccer, and that's not something we talked about. What position did you play?
I played center back.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you play?
No, I was hoping you named something that I was going to...
Defense.
Okay.
Defense, yeah.
Yeah. So, we met yesterday, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and thank you for doing the follow-up that I asked for. I think my biggest thing is just I have a district that has a lot of rec centers. I actually think we probably...
I think you have the most.
Yeah, we probably do.
Yeah. Including ones that aren't necessarily rec centers, but that we
Yeah.
support. Right? Yep.
And just want to make sure that you have familiarity with my district. Something that we always struggle with is getting the city to pay as much attention to the third council district as they do elsewhere. So that's I guess my question I want to ask is how do you plan on making sure that you're approaching the whole city in programming here?
Well, first of all, I consider myself very hands-on, so I would like to do frequent visits, right? Not quarterly, but as much as I can. Weekly, obviously, might be a little bit of a tall task, but trying to hit every center that we operate at least monthly, right? And if not me, the external staff that does not work there, in order to collaborate with them, to think about programs, right, to have meetings there. And so for me, in terms of being connected, I don't feel like I can be most connected unless it's actually boots on the ground where I'm visiting there, whether it be with you or a group that you think is important for me to meet with or go on a tour with, or my staff to actually be there, right, my colleagues. And so I think that's where it starts, number one. But also I think continued frequent ongoing conversations, right, with the folks that work at these rec centers, with the community groups, right, that either have programming there or want to have programming there, or collaborate with us on programming and on resources, and also just working with you directly and taking your lead in terms of your recommendations on, who you think I should be speaking with, who you think I should be partnering with, who you think I should be collaborating with. So I think the combination of those things will allow me to stay in touch and to make sure that I'm updated on the ongoing programming and just sort of general updates.
I also want to ask, you mentioned collaboration, which I think is, kind of vital to your role. As we talked about yesterday, Parks and Rec is the department that doesn't necessarily have, a stated mandate from, in terms of, municipal governance. When Act 47 happened, the biggest cuts came to Parks and Rec. It is, I think all of us see it as a vital role, but it is, in some ways, it is not like plowing the streets or making sure that the firefighters are putting out fires or something like that. It kind of gives you flexibility to turn the department into what you and the mayor and council want to see. But also with that, it's really hard to do that with the budget that we can offer you. So your collaboration with outside partnerships is vital, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how do you plan on creating those partnerships with other organizations, be it things like the Housing Authority or Pittsburgh Public Schools or private institutions, the REIs and the things like that can be so important to the work you do.
I think first it's important internally to see how we're collaborating, right? Just within our department, I think there's been a little bit of a history of different groups working in silos, right? So, for example, is our community enrichment team working across everybody from farmers markets to rec centers to senior centers, right? Are our food people, our food programs outside of farmers markets working across other groups to offer programming to intergenerational, right, to families, not just to youth? And so I think the first thing to do is just to look internally and understand where there's been gaps, where there's not been enough communication and collaboration across our groups. And so I think there's certainly some opportunity just right there. But then when we think about outside partners, it's understanding first and foremost from just a learning phase in terms of what their plans are, because we want to make sure we're collaborating on the same mandates, right? And generally, I think, the partners that we've worked with, we have, right? But I'm also thinking about outside groups maybe that haven't historically, when we're talking about rec centers, thinking about the symphony, thinking about the zoo, thinking about FIPS, right? Thinking about other groups maybe we haven't collaborated with previously, and how do we get them on a programmatic schedule to our specific sites. So I think it just starts with, honestly, just reaching out and understanding what kind of programming that they can offer. I'm thinking about the aviary as well, and evolving those programs, right? So honestly, I would start with trying to connect with any of those outside groups that have shared interests and shared programmatic mandates as us.
Yeah, and happy to partner. I'm on the FIPS board, and one of the things that drives me insane is they talk about a lot of education outreach they do, reaching out to schools, and it's like North Allegheny, Mount Lebanon, Upper St. Clair. It's never Brashear, and so I'd be happy to work on whatever that might look like.
That'd be great. And one thing I didn't even mention is our collaboration with PPS, right? I think that there's been a gap there, right? Not just in terms of using their sites, but understanding what programs they have, what programs we have, what we can offer, how we can partner, especially in locations where we might not have a rec center, where we might not have some sort of programming going on, and collaborating with those principals and those administrators to understand how can we reach more families, how can we partner with you, how can we figure out transportation if that is a gap. So those are things in my head that I feel like we can make a lot of headway on.
So I have to, I know you're a McKinsey guy. So if I can ask, in 4 years that you'll, Mayor O'Connor's 4-year term, what KPIs will you be evaluating yourself with to determine if you've done a good job at the end of this 4 years?
Yeah, I think there's some data that I think can't be quantified. I'm not trying to evade the question, but one thing.
Would McKinsey allow this?
You'll see that my shortest stint was at McKinsey. So, one thing from just like a numbers and KPIs perspective is understanding how many kids are actually getting into our rec centers, how many seniors are getting into our healthy active living centers. And so I need that data in terms of understanding, first of all, what it was at previously and how we can increase that. At the same time, right, as it pertains to support, to potential funding, right, we need that data also in case we do need some supplemental funding, in case we do want to expand or create a new program. So when we talk about actual KPIs and numbers, I think I don't have the exact number yet because I don't have the historical data, but I think it's important for us to understand just how many kids, how many seniors are going to those healthy acting living centers. Another thing I think that's super important is like taking a user, sort of a human-centered approach in terms of an empathetic approach is sort of surveys, right? Feedback from seniors, from citizens, from families of youths, and understanding from sort of, for lack of a better phrase, a scorecard, right? What the feedback is, right? What we're doing well, what we're not doing well, where are there gaps. So thinking about KPIs from that perspective too, in terms of, right, like starting with a baseline, right? Starting with a baseline of initial feedback, and then how can we evolve that? How can we make things better if we resurvey 3, 6, 9 months down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very big on what gets measured gets improved, and if we don't have measurements, we can't say what direction things are going. So looking forward to seeing that and you implementing policies around that as we move forward here. And again, want to welcome you into my district as much as possible.
And so happy to work with you on that. I know Councilwoman Warwick, when we were at your district meeting the other night, she had talked about surveys and feedback as well. So if you already have something in place, happy to work with you on that and collaborate on it too.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Warwick.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being here. I know we've met, so I'm very interested in the work that Parks and Rec, City Parks does, and I'm glad to be the committee chair, because there is so much potential, and I'm definitely excited about the how much Mayor O'Connor has elevated the department, you know what I mean, coming in with, especially around our kids, right? It was funny, just before I was signing my boys up for Dynamo, and I thought of you as I guiltily checked the no, I won't be no, I won't be helping. Sorry, box. But
You
at any
better
rate,
look out. There might be some new
I know.
asks of parents. So.
But one thing I think that obviously that's that's great experience, right? That's a huge organization, and I'm sure lots of personalities and managing folks, but I think you have a lot of experience in sort of talent management, HR, and I think that. Well, I guess I could ask you. I mean, it seems to me like that is something that could really come in handy in this city, both in terms of growing the department, in terms of kind of helping longtime team members who've kind of been doing their thing for a very long time, maybe, switch it up a little bit,
Yep.
and also just building the bench for the future. I don't know if you
Exactly.
want to talk about
Yeah,
that at
I
all.
think, that is sort of my corporate career, right?
Yeah.
Organizational development, staffing, right? Organizational behavior, people management, people programs. So I think, and I had mentioned in my opening remarks, I think there's a lot of transferable skills there, right? Just looking at our department in terms of, quote unquote load balancing, right? Like what is everybody working on? Where are there opportunities to collaborate, to cross collaborate across programs? And like you said, right? Like building a bench, cross training is super important for me. I know that everybody has their primary role, but I think it's important to, if possible, be cross-trained, to be as a backup, or to support a potential program that's not your primary program. One thing also in my head is thinking about, like, how are we developing and growing our own staff in terms of thinking about the future, in terms of thinking about future leaders, right? And things of future leadership, right? So, it's not there yet, but a formalized training program, right? Thinking about, as our staff comes in, where do they not just want to be right now, but where do they want to be in a couple years, right? And how can I help them get there? Whether it is internal training, whether it's external training, whether it's cross training, and whether it's, just most importantly, getting them involved and exposed to things maybe that isn't part of their primary role, if it doesn't take away from their role. So, so yes, I thank you for mentioning that. But I think, those sort of skills that I've built up in my corporate career, I feel like are going to be super helpful for me in just assessing where we can grow internally as a department, sort of staffing wise.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, and we've talked about this a lot, where, we have, where we have, and I have very few rec centers. So, I mean, I have McGee, I think I just have McGee, and then I have a senior center.
Yeah.
So it's
Does
healthy
Bergwin
active.
fall in your district?
Bergwin, right?
Yeah.
But that's a community group
Right,
operating
which-
out of right. So there are some buildings, but active rec centers, and the rec centers are McGee specifically. For talking about the kids, I mean, it's really a hub. I mean, it is such an amazing resource for the community. Not having that resource in other communities, whether that's in terms of summer programming, after school programming. I know Mayor O'Connor is very interested in before school programming. I'm
Yes.
curious to see what that will look like, and I think there's a need there. I know transportation is a tricky piece of that. So yeah, I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on ways, and I'm glad that you mentioned the collaboration with PPS and how we can do that to get city parks
Yep.
into either to supplement work that community groups are already doing in their own spaces, utilize our spaces where we don't have programming, and then also, well, go ahead.
Well, I mean, yes, McGee is a model for how we want our rec centers to look, right? It's constantly filled, right? On behalf of Dynamo, I actually asked if we could rent it out. The answer was no before I came on. And then Erica said, wait, am I going to get fired? I didn't give you a permit. I think for some of our rec centers in the areas where maybe they aren't as filled and as robust as McGee, I think it starts with education and marketing. I think there's a real opportunity there to think about how we are partnering with not just community groups, but just the constituents, the citizens there, right? How are we getting the word out, and it might not necessarily be an Instagram post, right? It might be more grassroots marketing, more thinking about how we can lean on council members, whether they have newsletters, whether they have some groups that maybe they deal with that we haven't necessarily been in touch with. So I think that there's a real opportunity for some evolved education and marketing to get the word out. And then I also think it's just evolving our programs, right? Each of our rec centers offer a little bit of different programming. So understanding what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what potential programs will attract more kids, more families. And that's both just internally with us developing them, but also with partnering with groups who come in who might be able to offer programming that they haven't seen before.
Yeah, I feel I've said this a bunch of times. I've sort of made this pitch to many people, but I feel like there is an opportunity with Stop the Violence funding. Of course, City Parks has, because funding is an issue, right? You're one of our smallest budgets, but do such good work, and I think that there is really an opportunity for City Parks to do more. You know. With some of that funding opening up to, especially in those areas where we don't have rec centers, right? Where there are active community groups who are doing work that has, for a very long time supplemented what we have not been doing as a city, and how we can support that via City Parks.
I know, Parks, at least as it's currently constructed, plays a small part in specifically in receiving funding through our city sports programs. And so one thing I can say is that we are for the first time going to be offering a flag football league in conjunction with Pittsburgh flag football. And that's a new program, right? So we've done clinics, right, at the rec centers, but now it's going to be an actual league that is free, and that will be each rec center, we're hoping to each have a team, but it's not going to only be geared just towards rec centers, right? And so we want to invite anybody who's interested, and obviously it's a free program, to join. And not only with our own community engagement and marketing, but we're also working with flag football, Pittsburgh flag football, to think about innovative and strategic ways of marketing to families and to kids who haven't typically participated in these programs. It also goes to transportation, which we're working on as well, because we do have the vans to make sure we're picking up kids and taking them. And the games will be outside of our rec centers, at the fields at our rec centers. So I think that could be a good opportunity to just expand some programming and get more kids involved with athletics.
And with the flag, are the existing community leagues participating in those tournaments, or
no? So there is a league that I believe plays up at Shenley that is, you pay for it, and that was my concern as well. Is there going to be sort of a collision here where, and no, because I think that the kids typically at our rec centers do not participate in that league for one reason or another, and so I don't think there's going to be an issue of the leagues, competing against each other. There might be a fun sort of championship game between, one league and another, but it's going to be our own programming in collaboration with Pittsburgh flag football.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah, in sports as well, I think there's an opportunity. But again, it's how can we support, whether it's staff, whether it's equipment, how can we support the groups that are already doing that work? And to allow them to do it, whether, maybe they're only doing it 3 days a week, give them what they need to be able to do it 5 days a week, or whether it's space, staff, equipment, whatever.
I think resources, the City League, that City Football League, I believe through Stop the Violence, we do provide some resources and referees and support that way too. But it's a good point. Obviously, I know, council has, a job of thinking about that Stop the Violence funding, and, we'll take our lead from yourselves, but as it pertains to sort of programming from Parks, I think, it's been a success, and, hopefully excited to continue evolving that if possible.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And then in terms of sports, one thing, I don't know if this is I find in Pittsburgh, it always feels like there's a little bit of a void for girls' sports. I don't know if that's something that folks are thinking about at City Parks, or if you have any thoughts on that. I am
thinking about that. I have a daughter who plays soccer.
Soccer's always the big one.
I am proud that, specific to Dynamo, each year we have increased female participation, which is a priority for me. So not just thinking about females, but inclusivity as well, right? And I think about Dynamo, we restarted something called Top Soccer, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's called the Outreach Program for Soccer. I actually was a volunteer when I was growing up in the South Hills with Top Soccer, and so it's adaptive programming. And so we stood that up almost a year, maybe 2 years ago now. And so, yes, thinking about girls, thinking about inclusivity, adaptive programming. So that's a super important priority of mine.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen parents in Greenfield in particular, sort of stand up a girls' basketball team, at McGee or whatever, or also a girls' baseball team. But it's a lot for parents, you know what I mean? So if we can support that, it's a big lift, right?
Yeah.
And then of course your kid ages out, and then it's like who takes over from there? So
Yeah, it's very important. And when I think about flag football, that is something on our radar through Stop the Violence in terms of having a female league, because there are some female high school leagues. So we're thinking about that specifically for Pittsburgh flag football. But I think it's a good general point, right? And that's something we're certainly thinking about.
Great. And then finally, with our seniors, again, I appreciate your staff did a great job with the Valentine's Day event. It was super, and I'm excited to work together to try and boost those numbers at the rec center. So we have so many seniors in Pittsburgh, so it's sort of like, it's a little unclear, like why aren't we,
Yep.
why are our rec centers not packed to the gills, right?
I
Or
agree.
sorry, our healthy active living centers. So
Yeah, I think, that was a great event, right? And we need to think about not just them coming in for events and for bingo, right? What programming are we offering? How are we staying in touch with them? How are we marketing? How are we educating them? And what outside groups can we partner with to bring them and to have them continually coming? So, yes, I mean, it was Valentine's Day, and so, not always going to be that big of a crowd, but how can we make it that big or almost as big?
yeah.
Just on normal days where there might not be some sort of special event.
Yeah, and also, I mean, transportation too. Obviously, we're talking a lot about fleet, but you guys, I mean, that's a big part, right? Especially with seniors.
Yes.
Is their ability to get to a thing, like whatever it is, whether it's a trip to Walmart or a event, so having those vehicles to be able to come pick folks up, it's all part of the part of the big picture. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
Thank you.
I'm excited to continue working together, and
Me too.
welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Mosley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and thank you for your time last week or the week before. Just having introductory touch base. A lot of my questions, we're already asked. So I don't want to be redundant, but I did want to elaborate a little bit on, utilizing facilities, across city facilities and PPS facilities, but also, adding, community spaces, whether it be houses of worship with gathering spaces, in my district in particular, like the Kingsley Association. I had a conversation, with Mayor O'Connor, about, how could we potentially utilize spaces like that, CCAC Homewood, the Pitt CEC. In Homewood, we definitely have talked about, kind of co-utilization of PPS facilities, and we even talked about that in our conversation, particularly in neighborhoods that don't have healthy active living centers or rec centers. Have you also, given thought to partnerships, with nonprofits and community groups that also have spaces that could potentially, be utilized for programming? Would you like to, elaborate on your thinking?
I don't know if you heard when Councilman
I apologize.
When Councilman Coghill was talking about, I went and visited Grandview Church in Beachview, and he had requested that I meet with them because they're in a spot where they don't have a rec center near them, right? So I'm speaking about rec centers, but just generally thinking about sites that we don't actually, offer programming in right now. And so, I met with them, and we have, supplemented some programs previously, but thinking about more formalizing that sort of on a weekly or, twice a week basis over a, 8 to 12 week program. And so when I think about that, when I think about senior programs, I think that's a great point, right? Like, how can we help? How can we partner, right, with them if they have people on staff, or external organizations that also want to make an impact if we have shared goals, right, sharing resources and thinking about what sites, where we don't have a healthy acting living center, where we don't have a rec center, how can we partner together to offer programming, right? And so obviously that comes with, potential transportation, our own staffing capacity, potential funding, but yeah, I mean, where we're able, we would love to do that and to partner with the appropriate groups to offer that programming, because that's our goal, right? Obviously, we operate healthy acting living centers and rec centers, but we have more sites than that from the city. But then there's also groups that operate sites that want and need our help, and so we're certainly open to helping where appropriate.
Sure, I appreciate that, because one thing that I think about a lot. And it seems like Mayor O'Connor is thinking similarly, and obviously he's been talking about before school, but I've been thinking about how does Parks and Rec, PPS, and youth serving organizations kind of figure out a way to align programming so that we know before 7:30 that's prior to school, so that would be some type of before school programming, but then around 3-ish, about in the next half an hour from now, the schools will be done for the day, and then what type of programming then exists, whether it's Parks and Rec, PPS, or you serving nonprofits, and looking at each neighborhood kind of as a matrix and say, okay, in Hazelwood, at 3:30. These are the potential Parks and Rec offerings. These are the potential PPS offerings, after school programs. And then these are the youth serving nonprofits, and kind of building kind of a snapshot, by community, what, types of programming that we have. So looking at, from 3 p.m. to, maybe 10 p.m. for, the older kids, the 16, 17, 18-year-olds. But then also thinking about, you do the weekends as well. Have you given, any thought to that kind of,
I think,
collaboration?
I think proactivity is super important here, right? Not being reactive, and I think proactivity as it pertains to programming, as Councilwoman Warwick had sort of asked about my sort of corporate professional life as it pertains to, recruiting and people management, program management. I mean, that's, sort of what I live and breathe in terms of not just programming for next week, right? Like what offerings do we have? Who are we working with? And let's, get it on a piece of paper, right? So that let's program it and market it out, right? Early, right? Not a week before, maybe a month before, right? Maybe 6 weeks before, so that those who can participate have enough lead time to maybe not participate in other things, right? So that they can plan, so that we can think about transportation, not the day of, but the week prior or multiple weeks prior. So, what you just said, I think is a mandate for me in terms of being organized, being proactive, being programmatic, and then from there, how are we getting it out to the appropriate groups and who are we partnering with?
Sure. And one of the things that I've, thought about is, really, thinking about, these spaces, it's multi-generational, like lifelong learning, spaces, whether it's, like you said, Grandview Church, and Councilman Coghill's district, or, the Kingsley Association, where, maybe the 16-year-old, child is, in the night basketball league, while at the same time grandma, is learning Canva.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or just something, similar to that, and thinking about, not only how do we collaborate, across spaces and venues, but then collaborate, across programming. And I think that, your background, in the corporate space, I think would be helpful, because one thing that we've been talking about a lot, I guess that was in December when Travis Williams and Patrick Joyle from the Pittsburgh Pirates, were here. And one thing that we talked about, beyond them, improving their payroll, and I think that was that. I'm gonna say City Council should take credit for the recent free agent signings that the Pirates have made in upping the and upping their payroll. But on a serious note, we did talk about figuring out ways to get our sports teams to have more skin in the game, being that they get so much support, from the city, whether it's the Riverhounds, the Steelers, the Pirates, the Penguins, and and figuring out, particularly in lieu of, Parks and Rec, it doesn't have the hugest budget. How could we potentially supplement that,
Yep.
With strategic partnerships, particularly with our sports teams.
Yep. Agree completely. So, yep.
And then I just had two other quick points / questions. We spoke. We both talked about the kind of nuanced space in youth sports with like the travel teams, and my older son plays travel baseball. My younger son plays travel basketball. They haven't played rec ball for a number of years. And one of the things, and this is definitely more of a long-term thing, but I think it would be interesting to look at Parks and Rec and potentially partnerships with our professional sports teams to establishing some venues within the city that can attract the same kind of programming that you see at No Off Season,
Yep.
that you see at All American, over in Trafford. No disrespect to Trafford and the North Hills, but I would love to see us be able to attract those kind of tournaments. When my son played for the Diamond Dogs, we would spend weekend after weekend in Ohio, Strongsville, Cleveland, and we have 5 or 6 teams from the Diamond Dogs, staying in hotels,
Right.
going to restaurants all weekend. And I think unless you're in that
Yep.
kind of AAU travel sports world, you don't really even understand the economic engine that it is for regions that can attract, those tournaments. And while we also definitely want to support our rec programming and our folks that can't either, because of time, price point, or whatever, participate, in travel sports, I think, Pittsburgh in the long term, this is long term kind of capital projects, but I think it would be great to begin those conversations with our professional sports teams, because at the end of the day, Trafford is great, North Hills is great, but if we could bring those kind of tournaments to the actual city of Pittsburgh, and folks really enjoy the amenities, which I think are greater, within city limits. Do you just have any initial thoughts about the ideas of sparking those conversations?
Yeah.
Being your knowledge of rec sports as well as your knowledge of
I agree with
sports.
you, and I'm guilty of it too, right? I have children that play club soccer and travel hockey, and that's just because that's what we need to do. To those are the resources there, or the the leagues there that we need to participate in. But I think there's a healthy middle ground that, like you said, maybe not this summer, but maybe within the near future, maybe next year, right? How are we have so many baseball fields, right? We have so many spaces just across rec centers, across PPS, right? Sports just in general. And so I agree with you, right? And whether that's through our city sports team or, via another sort of strategic way, I think I agree with you. I think there's a real opportunity for us to host tournaments, to host leagues where it isn't, families needing to shell out thousands of dollars, but it's still competitive, right, for the kids, and fun, most importantly, right? And so I know we've, talked about that one-on-one, and would love to, to think about that more, but I do think there's a real opportunity just to utilize what we have in the city to offer that.
Right, and my last question is like your thoughts about expanding, arts and music programming, within Parks and Rec. And maybe you could, give us, in your short time in your role, have you been able to assess, the arts programming, the music programming? But I even think about like nonprofits that have music studios in their facilities, and because some youth, like, they don't play basketball, but they may like to rap, they may like to sing, they may do poetry, and things like that, and think about the performing arts and how that potentially, in partnership with youth serving organizations that also do that work, not to kind of get into their lane and take over that lane, but figuring out how Parks and Rec could also not just focus on sports, but also the other types of entertainment.
There's a real opportunity there, right? Like in terms of organizations I've spoken to, like the answer is just like, yes, how we can partner, right? How can we partner? How can we do sort of a pilot program? How can we come to your rec center? And thinking more broadly, just in terms of exposure, right? Thinking about like, like the symphony, right? Or dance organizations, right? It doesn't have to be anything specific, but outside of sports, I think you're right. I think there's a real opportunity for us to partner with those organizations to offer programming at our rec centers, at potential special events, right, at parks. And so, yes, obviously not fully there yet, but I think that outside of sports, that's really important for us to work with those specific organizations. And also, underneath all of this is a real opportunity for training for our own staff as well with these organizations, right? So, if we don't necessarily specialize in some specific program, how are we getting our folks trained to offer that after a pilot program so that we can take it over and organically start those programs ourselves? So thinking about training in conjunction with these programs is really important to me as well.
Right. And the last thing that I'll say, particularly, around utilizing, our facilities, as my esteemed colleague from District ACES to my left, who's my co-partner at the Marshall Mansion. Look forward to working with you. And I got the email today to see it's already on your radar.
Yes.
It's something that we work on very closely over the last 2 years of really figuring out, how do we get the most out of that space. And I know the folks in Point Breeze, and Squirrel Hill, like in the kind of overlapping areas of District 8 and District 9 where we represent, and kind of the Marshall Mansion kind of really like sits at the border of our districts. Looking forward to working with you on that and figuring out ways to really not only, connect the Point Breeze community, but there is a growing interest in North Point Breeze and Homewood and Larmer and East Liberty and Shady Side, like the kind of communities that surround the Marshall Mansion. And we think that's a really interesting, opportunity to not only utilize that space, but make it kind of a cross neighborhood hub in that part of the East End. So I look forward to working with you on that and many things throughout the district. So thank you for your willingness to serve, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Strasburger?
Of course.
Being a little late and missing your intro. Overlapping meetings, that's what happens on Tuesday sometimes. But I really just want to reiterate first what I've heard my council colleagues say, that we have such an opportunity, I think, to look not just at our physical buildings and what we currently do as it relates especially to rec centers, but to take advantage of all the other, the wealth of resources that we have throughout the city. And just my personal take, just to say it a slightly different way, is if we could map out the city where we certainly currently have sort of after school, before school, after out of school time deserts, and figure out what's missing, or maybe it's not missing because we're just not counting what's already happening there, right? It's just not a city thing. Starting to break down the silos of what's city, what's not city, and just kind of count it all. Like we're all in this together, making sure that our young people are have enriching opportunities outside of school. Like that would be my goal, is to see it visually throughout the entire city. And maybe the thing that works for some of the young people in some parts of the city is actually going to some recreation center or activity outside of the city, right? And that we're counting that, and that's okay. So I won't belabor that because we've already had some great discussions about that today, and one-on-one as well. But I would say that as we're broadening continuing to broaden our thinking and the scope of what's possible in a lot of our spaces or outside of our own physical spaces, I hope that you'll use all of us as resources. We know our district so well. We know the arts organizations and the youth serving organizations and the spaces as well as anyone. So please lean on us for ideas for additional programming. I also think that the richness of our the older adults in our communities who are also needing to get out of their homes and serve and feel purposeful and useful can be great resources for tutoring for this and that in our rec centers as well. So, that leads me to older adults in our healthy active living centers, and we had a great post agenda last year. It was last year. The years all blend together, but it was last year. Focusing on what a model would look like for older adult programming, and we heard from so many, from Luann here at Parks to folks representing Dr. Gilliard from the Allegheny Area on Aging, to Agency on Aging, to rec center leaders out in Plum that have been together for 2 years studying this work and looking at models like Rochester, Michigan, where they have attracted population because of the way that they serve their older adults, right? And I think that we could, with our aging population and with our need to attract additional residents, our residents don't necessarily have to be working age. They can be, they can be older and retired and the types of folks that we want to attract here. So I guess my question is, are there additional opportunities that you see to really, we obviously don't have it in the budget to build like one amazing, $30 million senior center hub that's going to do everything for us. But so with the limitations that we have, are there ways that you think that we can level up?
I think, first of all, looking at our programming, right, outside of, like I had said previously, right, like outside of bingo on Fridays every 2 weeks, right, sticking with what is helping, what is attracting our seniors, but also, looking at what we can evolve. And I had mentioned this previously, but like looking internally just within our own groups, for example, we have City Farms, right, who goes around and help with gardens, right? We haven't gone to senior centers to help them build a garden, right? Is there an opportunity there, just looking internally regarding the programs we have, to start that, right? We're thinking about that. We're thinking about, some of the community enrichment that we're doing with the youths, right? Like what can we be doing at the Healthy Acting Living Centers as well? So I think it really starts with just looking internally at all the great programs that we are offering, maybe in a silo, and how can we expand that, right? How can we collaborate just internally across? And then I think externally, we're talking about external groups working with rec centers, but how does that also work with Healthy Acting Living Centers too? So looking at that, and then education and marketing as well, I think is important. We had at the Valentine's Day event, there were some seniors in Hazelwood that was their first time there, and they just said, we didn't know about this, right? So how are we reaching these folks to make sure that they see what the programming is, and connecting them and getting them there? And if transportation is a need or is an issue, how are we helping to get them there? So those are some things that we're thinking about that I think could be some sort of immediate wins in terms of evolving our programming.
Yeah, and certainly, as you've alluded to, there are many of us who have not only newsletters and e-newsletters, but social media accounts. Yep. And it's often the case that we're all leading very busy lives, and so we don't proactively go and search to see what's happening. But if there was some regimented way that you all could share with us to get it in time for our newsletter, to get it in time to get it out ahead of time on our social media, and then not only do we know about it and we can share it with targeted audiences or our general audiences, but as someone who does not have an official city rec center or healthy active living center, I would love to go to visit someone else's district and see what's going on in some of those events, and be happy to go anywhere in the city just to kind of see what's going on in our amazing, like what's already happening that I know is incredible, that we can even further improve. So please let us know about that so we can also attend.
It's a good point though. Like when I think about working in people management, or something as simple as like sharing a new job requisition, right? Like going to the specific hiring leadership and saying, hey, can you like reshare this on LinkedIn, for example? So us going to you all to say, hey, we have this program coming up in 3 weeks. How can we work together to make sure that we are reaching those, those eyeballs, reaching those families, and whether that's a share on a social media post, whether that's sharing in a newsletter, whether that's, an email group. So I think, there's a real opportunity for us to connect with you more and work with you on it.
And if it's one that's a particularly great one to visit, let us know. This is the one to come to. Please come to it, Yeah, great. That's really all I had. I appreciate all of your time today and your all that the time and the energy you put into it so
course.
far. So look forward to working with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Ah, Councilwoman Gross.
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Here I am.
There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm out sick today. But I'm glad to be on camera with you all. Director, we spoke in a pre-interview and I've got your resume in front of me. I wasn't on for your introductory remarks, but my staff, thank you, has given me some of the notes that you said earlier in the interview. We've covered a lot of topics. I'm really happy to hear the discussions about facilities. I feel like we touch on those subjects at least once a year during like budget season when we've talked about, like I've got facilities in my district that are long overdue for reinvestment. But I'm really glad that you are thinking about the ways that we need to maybe look at the demographics and the changing needs in neighborhoods. And I like to remind everyone in some of the city doesn't change rapidly, but some of the city, like the district that I represent, does change rapidly. And we have parts of the district where everyone used to be seniors, and now the streets are full of young families and children. And we adjust our programming the best we can, but we also need to maybe adjust the facilities and the locations of those programs. So I think you've touched on it a little bit, but I didn't know if you wanted to expand those thoughts at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. First and foremost, I think we need to look at the demographics within each area, and whether that's youth, whether that's seniors, whether there is or isn't a site where we're currently operating from. Soliciting feedback from those local community groups, those local councils, and understanding, like I've said, what has worked, what programming has worked, what programming maybe has been asked for, right, that we have not delivered on, that could be an opportunity. So I think it's important to hear first from those that are the participants in the programs. But yeah, I'll stop there. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I agree with you in terms of thinking about evolving our programs, but also adjusting them to the specific folks that are there. I think the other thing too is when I think about collaboration is understanding what other districts are doing, what other rec centers, what the programming is there, what other healthy acting living centers, what programming is there, and if it's successful, can it be duplicated in other programming in other sites?
Great. I look forward to that. I think that's kind of like a challenge in front of us that we're all going to need to work on for a while to do that engagement, make those decisions, keep budgetary issues in mind, etc. My staff has provided me with some notes, and we were glad to hear you mention just a few minutes ago the idea of connecting our City Farms program to healthy active living centers, to our senior centers, which is a fantastic idea. I'll remind council that we have a children's garden is it Ormsby, I think, on the south side. So the idea of kind of tailoring what is gardened and the kinds of plants and the kinds of installation that you do to the program that you're targeting or the age group that you're targeting has been really popular there, right? So parents are engaged and the kids, there's a lot of young children's programming at Ormsby. And so it's lovely that they have a garden that matches it. And that's been supported by our Parks and Rec Department's City Farms program. At the other sites that Parks and Rec reaches out to, both actively through our own employees and then from the funding that the Food Justice Fund provided to grantees to do outreach to community gardens work. We've tracked over the last 5 years that in 2020, there was only, I think, 4 gardens in the city that was actively supported by the city in terms of materials or funding or technical assistance or outreach, those kinds of things. So 4 gardens in 2020, and in 2025, Parks and Rec touched 55 gardens, which is just fantastic. I think it's something like 1,200% increase. And so I think that is a great role for Parks and Rec. Again, it provides a kind of different programming that doesn't fall just in the bucket of athletics. I'm glad that Councilman Mosley brought up performing arts, but I also think, the recreation space, the healing activities, it's multi-generational across all of these sites. I've got notes in front of me that says there's something like volunteers in the age ranges of 5 years old to 82 years old at the community gardens. And so it really is a place where you have not just like senior programming, but like multi-generational programming. So I hope that we can look forward to expanding the ways that we invest in kind of all of the food programming. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
I agree. I think, food equitability is super important, right? And that falls underneath Parks and Rec. And so I know we already have some programs that from last year that are still ongoing, right, through the Food Justice program. But, it also goes to our farmers markets as well, right? It's not just city farms. It's not just our Food Justice program. So I think that's vital, right? And I mentioned that sort of in my opening remarks. I think it's very important. So we are looking at that sort of like full scale, right? The full umbrella of, where we are operating in the city, where we can potentially expand, right? Where we haven't had specifically a farmer's market previously. And then just thinking about like, how are we getting people there? How are we educating? How are we partnering with our citizens, but also with and I go back to this again, but with external groups that have partnered with us historically, but also maybe creating some new partnerships to think about food education and marketing as it pertains to how we can best serve.
I love that response. We have, I think, the most enthusiastic feedback from the gardens that we not only provided, as Councilman Coghill knows, now we provide truckloads of wood chips, which if you don't know gardening, is in high demand for every garden. And, we bought seedlings for gardens, fencing, whether you're talking about groundhogs at the ground level or deer with tall fencing, is a really high demand. And in some parts of the city, you cannot have a garden without the fencing. It just, people abandon them. It's just, all of the plants get eaten nonstop, so it's really discouraging. So I think that's a great place for the city to step into. We also know that it's super affordable. We buy lots and lots of stuff, so it's easy for us to buy these things. It's really pennies compared to our total budget, but it's not impossible for a bunch of volunteers, right? Or it can be really prohibitive for the bunch of volunteers to buy those either material supplies or the ongoing things like seedlings. So I know in my district, because we had really experienced farmers, people who had farmed professionally, that they are measuring their produce. And so they doubled their production because we were able to help them expand their footprint with soil and fencing and the kinds of things I mentioned. I think that one of the things we can work on together is how to measure the impact at these sites across the city. So again, if we're touching something like 55 sites, either directly with our own staff and supplies or indirectly through re-grantees or partnerships, and people know how to do this. It's just that we kind of haven't staffed up the capacity in Parks and Rec to do that. I think that would be, I think it would be really eye-opening and really encouraging people. We have, again, that one site where we know that they doubled their produce in one season, and all of that produce was donated. So all of the production of the garden is donated to a local food pantry in the Hill District. So it's really incredibly, like, they wouldn't have the fresh foods if it hadn't been for this community garden that's on Pittsburgh City Park and West Penn Park, and had the support and supplies from City Farms. And all of that would have meant that, you know, we had households in the city living on just kind of packaged foods instead of having, basically, I think it's something like 50 gallons of produce weekly in the summertime. So that's a really, I think it's an area for us to improve upon. How our gardens both partner, but also kind of like what are the outcomes that we're able to achieve by providing these things. Do you have any thoughts? Sorry, it's also strange. I can't really see you while I'm talking, so I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I agree. I think it's measurable results is super important. Councilman Charlene had asked me sort of about KPIs, right, in terms of how to measure results, right? So I think the point you made in terms of, you know, measuring the impact that we are making is really important, and will also inform, you know, us, right, and if possible, help with funding, help with support, help with resources as we want to grow this program. So I do want to comment that I think that that measuring that impact, and just more broadly across, right, the department, thinking about how qualitatively and quantitatively we are measuring impact across all programs is super important for us to inform on what, you know, we think will work and what we can do in the future.
Thank you, appreciate it. I think I'll stop my questions there, Mr. Chair. I will follow up, I think, with an email, because I do have kind of even more reporting out about the food systems work, and I'm eager to share it. So we can follow up at another time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I think almost every question I had has already been answered. What I will say is I'll simply flag for you towards other council members talking about sort of shared resources and sort of the big picture. I have had preliminary conversations with PPS about the potential for the city to sort of program on their facility. So we talked about Shenley Field in the Upper Hill District as an example, being able to program it similarly to how Shenley Oval's programmed. And then we also talked about the basketball courts in Manchester, which are owned by PPS, but not necessarily maintained that well by PPS. So could we have a cooperation agreement that allowed the city to come on and then potentially fix up and maintain and then program? And then lastly for you, I'm assuming you've been to Ammons Rec Center.
I was just there on Friday for the MLK basketball event that was rescheduled.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So long story short, you've seen the jerseys in the rafters. So last year, the organization that initiated that started that process again for the next round of Hall of Fame and sort of inductees, jerseys that were going to go up. And I believe Dwayne and Parks and Rec even had identified the vendor. We just have to pick back up the conversation in terms of making the selection of who gets hung next, purchasing the jerseys, and then obviously having them hung. So what I would like to do is copy you on an email with the person who's leading this effort to pick that conversation back up. It's their belief that they could be, if we start the conversations, renew them now, we'll be good to go around April with being able to have the ceremony and do all of that.
Great.
So I'll just copy you on that.
Yeah. Great.
FYI. Okay. Anything else? If not, then we've exhausted the business of this pre-agenda interview, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.